And we are live. What's going on, YouTube? And welcome to Goal Line Hockey Live. This is our inaugural podcast as we are going to be changing things up a little bit. So hopefully I see some of you guys jump in here throughout the stream. And thank you for joining us here on this beautiful Thursday morning here on Long Island. We have a lot to get to today. To those of you watching on the recap or watching now, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I really will appreciate that. We have a lot to get to today here. So the overview for today's podcast, we're going to be changing the way we do things. So I'm going to go over what we're going to talk about during the show. And then once we go over all the topics, then I'll try and answer some of your questions at the end of the video. And of course, if you're watching the replay, also make sure to leave your questions down below to get answered in the next show. So let's start off with the Flyers. The Flyers having their press conference this afternoon. It's the new era of orange in Philadelphia. The Flyers have announced their new president of hockey operations, as well as their general manager. We'll talk about that. We're also going to take a look at the New York Rangers. A lot of interesting stuff swirling around New York here since they were eliminated by the New Jersey Devils in the first round of the playoffs. So the expectation is we might see a little bit of action on that front. The Rangers, in terms of a new head coach, in terms of potential roster movement, keep an eye out there for the Rangers. And also the Chicago Blackhawks. We're starting to hear some stuff about what could be going on in Chicago now that Connor Bedard has come into the fold. Of course, the controversy, which we talked about the other day, so I'll be recapping that, as well as our new segment that we'll be doing at the end of the show, which is Cup Check. So we're going to go through each NHL fan base and kind of do a mood tracker, but with a cup check. So that's what we're going to do toward the end of the show. Then obviously we're going to recap some of last night's action and going into tonight in terms of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And also I have some updates here on the channel. Of course, this being one of them. So we'll see how things go. Hopefully we see some people jump in here. Let's get right into it. So the Philadelphia Flyers, the other night, it was kind of leaked, but they had the official press conference this afternoon. The Philadelphia Flyers' new president of hockey operations is former NBC Sports announcer Keith Jones. Keith Jones comes into the fold for the Flyers. He's been around the Flyers organization for a long time. We've heard his name out there. I believe it came down to a couple of different people. RJ Umberger was one name that I heard. We obviously heard Keith Jones. It was a couple of guys. Eddie Olczyk was also in the mix as well. So the Flyers decided to go with somebody that's been in the media business. So I think this is a good pickup here for the Flyers. Also, not to mention Danny Briere. Danny Briere has been the interim GM of the Philadelphia Flyers now for a couple of months since they fired Chuck Fletcher back after the trade deadline. It seemed like this is kind of how things were going to unfold for him. I think that's part of the reason he took the job in Philadelphia was, the sense that he might get a promotion to an NHL GM spot. He spent plenty of years with the Flyers, and he is now going to be the next GM of the Flyers. I think there's going to be a little bit of controversy with the fact that, again, the Flyers are very notorious for taking former players and turning them into managerial assets of the team, which doesn't always work so well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. But I am confident that the Flyers are going to go in the right direction as long as they get rid of some of those senior advisors that have been there for a little while. So we'll see what happens there. We also have to take a look at the Rangers. There's a lot going on with the Broadway Blue Shirts. But before we get into that, guys, make sure to check out our link below. We have a Built Bar sponsorship. You get a 10% discount at checkout. So make sure to check out that Built Bar. Discount code is GLH. So make sure to do that. But the New York Rangers are in an interesting spot, right? So they've got the head coaching search. There's rumors about what roster movement we could see in Manhattan for the Rangers. So we're going to break this up into two separate segments. The first one being the coaching search. Now, a couple of names have been thrown out there for the Rangers, and we've been discussing that on our live streams at night, which also make sure to check those out as well after this video. But we've heard a lot of stuff about the Hartford Wolfpack current head coach. He's been a part of the Rangers organization for a couple of years. And funny enough, he actually used to be an assistant coach with the Philadelphia Flyers organization a few years back. It is Chris Knobloch. His name has been thrown out there for a little while. Obviously, he's got some, his fingerprints on some of the younger guys developing with the Rangers system. But the problem with the Rangers coaching search is, and specifically with a guy like Chris Knobloch, there's not a lot of experience there. And I think the Rangers are kind of done with that. Like they were able to get away with it with David Quinn when they took him from Boston College. No NHL coaching experience. But I think with Knobloch, it's you want the right combination of a guy that's going to help the younger guys like an Alexis Lafreniere and is also going to get the most out of your star players like an Artemi Panarin. And normally coaches don't fit into both of those categories. So it's kind of difficult when you look at in terms of a search for a new head coach, you have to find the perfect blend for specifically what we heard in the Rangers press conference, specifically those two players getting the most out of them in Alexis Lafreniere and Artemi Panarin. So the Rangers are going to have to figure that out. Chris Knobloch is one of the names. We've also heard Peter Laviolette's name. I think that kind of talk is kind of cooled off. So I really don't think that's where they're going to go at this point. But that is a name to watch for. We've also heard some former New York Rangers in the mix. And what's interesting, and this is from someone on Twitter, they were saying that if the Rangers go down the route, if you hear any links or interviews between Patrick Roy and Mark Messier, assume that this is going to go down the route of them going there. Because if the Rangers are really looking at Roy or Messier, you don't turn those guys down. Like if you give them an interview, chances are you're not going to say back, listen, we know you're interested, but we don't want to bring you in. That's not going to happen. If they do go down that route, if they do decide to go after a guy like Messier or Roy, the Rangers are going to probably go down that route, and they are very, very interested in those two guys. So we'll see what happens with that. So keep an eye on that. Now, what's interesting also with the Rangers here, and this is what we were looking at. If you guys have not already, make sure to like the video. I really do appreciate that. But this is from the Rangers. So all the notes from the Rangers would want to trade Artemi Panarin. I know that sounds lunacy, doesn't sound real, but it's more of the desire on all ends. So a team would want Artemi Panarin, which I'm sure that's not the issue. The Rangers would want the price tag for him. And then you also have the possibility of, does Panarin want to move out of New York? I don't think that's the case, considering he just signed there as a free agent a couple years ago. He could have gone anywhere in the National Hockey League, and he chose the New York Rangers. And it really sounded like he wasn't going to go anywhere else but the Rangers. So in my opinion, I really don't think he's going to be going, but that is being thrown out there. And again, we heard these rumors last year from Chris Drury. And thank you for joining us, Timothy. I appreciate that. Should the Rangers hire Laviolette to replace Gallant? I'm not too sure about that. And the reason I say that is kind of the problem we were just talking about with, you need to find the perfect blend of a coach that will play the young guys and get the most out of a guy like Lafreniere or Kakko, but is also going to help the older players, right? And I think the problem we saw in Washington with Laviolette is he's a good coach, but the problem is he wasn't playing the young guys enough. He wasn't giving them enough opportunity and enough ice time to really get the most out of them. And I think the concern, if the Rangers do bring in a guy like Laviolette, would be that same sort of scenario where you're not playing enough, where we didn't see much of Connor McMichael, Alexei Protas, and some of the younger guys in Washington because he would refuse to play them. And I would be concerned about some of the younger guys on the Rangers roster this season and maybe even next season if they went down the Laviolette route. But I do understand why they're looking into it. But I think as we start to see some more names go out there, depending on what happens in Pittsburgh, everybody's been saying Mike Sullivan. I'm a little weary even saying that, but that has been thrown out there. That's something to watch for. The Rangers will listen to offers on Lafreniere, Hedl, and Kakko. Now, again, I think the price is going to be exorbitantly high, but I think they are willing to really listen on offers. And the problem is, it's their salary cap situation. Their salary cap situation isn't really going to allow for them to sign everybody to these max extensions, right? When you've got Panarin on the book, you've got Kreider, you've got all these other all these other really good, talented players around, there is a salary cap ceiling. So the Rangers can only spend so much money. And I do think in this situation, they're kind of in a crux where they want to keep Lafreniere, Hedel, and Kakko, but they also, face the reality that we have to decide probably between the younger guys and the older guys on this roster. The Rangers would value, if they were to consider trading Lafreniere, the Rangers would value Alexis Lafreniere similar to the value of a 3rd to 8th overall pick, which would be in this year's draft. So that's not necessarily what they'd get, but in terms of value, that's what you're looking at. So a top 10 pick would be the value of equivalence for a guy like Lafreniere. So that's something to watch for if the Rangers do decide to go down that route. The problem is the Rangers are they have a ton of talent in terms of prospects. They have a ton of talent in terms of defense, goaltending, forwards. So it's not like if they trade Kakko or Hedel or Lafreniere, it's not like they're going to do a 1-for-1 for a defenseman to improve the defense. That's not really what they're looking at here. It's more of just trying to circumvent the salary cap. And that's where things get a little bit more difficult. And I think what ultimately is going to happen, and this is part of it, is depending on what happens with some of the other guys, right? What does the final price in terms of, Patrick Kane? Does Patrick Kane sign for another year or two? Same thing for Tarasenko. Is he going to stay? Nico Mikkola, what's his deal going to look like if he stays with the Rangers? Those are the kind of questions that we're going to have to see answered for the Rangers. But I do think that that's going to play a big factor here. We've also heard some stuff about, I hate to say it, in terms of trying to shed any money you can. The money on Barclay Goodrow, I think he's making $3.75 million for the next couple of years. There's a way they can move him to a team like the Blackhawks or the Predators to just free up some cap space. You do wonder if they'd go down that route. I also look at Ryan Lindgren. I know the Ranger fans love Ryan Lindgren, but I wonder if his name's going to get put into that conversation as well. It's not an ideal situation, but when the Rangers have the amount of depth that they have up front and on the back end, those guys that make between $2 to $5 million, that cap space is going to be vital for them to keep guys like Keandre Miller and Kakko and Lafreniere and Hedel. And I think what's interesting is the lack of talk about Keandre Miller leads me to believe that either A, the Rangers are being extraordinarily quiet on the Keandre Miller front, or B, we're going to see an extension and nobody's even considering Keandre Miller getting traded, which I do think it's the latter of the two, but I figured that I would mention Keandre Miller because he is an RFA this summer. So keep that in mind going into the summer for the Rangers. And then I already talked about this earlier, but the Rangers are looking to acquire a big physical center as a plan A this offseason. And the easy answer to that would be Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's an RFA this summer with arbitration rights with the Winnipeg Jets. The assumption is that he would sign a 1-year qualifying offer this summer. And let's be honest, we all know where he's heading to next season. He'll probably more likely than not be a member of the Montreal Canadiens. So the Rangers, who are looking to win the Stanley Cup right now, next season, they go for the rental, they get Dubois, right? And then you've got your big center for next season. So that's what we're looking at there. And then to end the Rangers segment, if Patrick Waugh or Mark Messier are to get an interview from the Rangers, consider them to be a favorite for the job. The Rangers personally wouldn't want to bother interviewing them if they'd expect to say no to either of them at the end. And that's really what we're looking at here. So if you hear any sort of interview or real good positive links to Patrick Waugh or Mark Messier, more likely than not, that is what we're going to be looking at. So keep an eye out for that. I think that's going to be really interesting what happens with the Rangers coaching front, because that is a kind of the eminent thing that needs to get figured out. But I do wonder what else in terms of roster movement, what else do the Rangers do here? So that's it for the Rangers. So now what we're going to look at is the Blackhawks. Now, a lot has been said about the Blackhawks. If you're from Chicago and you're a Blackhawks fan, you've been on cloud nine. If you're anybody else, this is a nightmare scenario. Of course, the Blackhawks had the incident about 12 months ago, And a lot of people were very upset that the Blackhawks did not lose a draft pick. You look at the Coyotes, they lost a first and second round pick in 2020 because of illegal testing of prospects. And with everything that we've known in terms of factual about the Blackhawks, absolutely nothing has been done except a fine, which, considering the Blackhawks made $5 million in season ticket sales the night of the draft lottery when they won, I don't think it hurts them all that much. The fact that they had that fine, it was probably paid for that night. So really tough circumstance. There's obviously the humanitarian side of it for the Blackhawks, which I totally understand. Really not good news for the victims and things like that. But for the Blackhawks as a franchise, this is huge. They've really started to, again, pending them drafting Connor Bedard with 99% certainty. You're going to have a group of Lucas Reichel, Frank Nazar, and Connor Bedard as your top 6 core. Not to mention, you're also going to throw in some really good defensemen who they've been drafting. Ethan Del Mastro, Kevin Korchinski, and I'm trying to remember the other one. I think it's Nolan Allen. So you're talking about the Blackhawks really starting to round the corner for their development. And I think that a guy like Bedard definitely speeds up the process. Don't be surprised with, I think, $41 million in cap space for the Blackhawks this year. Don't be surprised if we see them make that big move. If we see them get in a guy, maybe they bring back Patrick Kane. I don't know what it's going to be, but I do expect the Blackhawks to try to insulate Connor Bedard as much as possible in his first season. And considering how much money they've made in ticket sales, season ticket sales here over the past, really, the last week, don't be surprised if we see them invest back into the team. I think ownership's going to say, listen, with the amount of money we made here on Connor Bedard, let's just make sure that we take care of him. We take care of this team. We have a decent product on the ice next season. I think that's what we're looking at there. So this is something I'm kind of excited for. And this is our newest segment here to the channel, and it is Cup Check. So Cup Check is basically a mood tracker for the fan base. And I wanted to shout out the Blackhawks fans. I'm going to give them some cookies here because I think that with everything that's gone on, listen, the fan base has not done anything wrong here. They've had to endure between the logo controversy, the Stan Bowman, Joel Quenneville controversy, everything with this team over the last 2 years. For the fan base, I think it is just such a huge sigh of relief. And just knowing that you're getting a generational talent after losing Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, you have your next generational talent coming in. I think this is huge for the Chicago Blackhawks, an original 6 franchise with so much history and so much. Really, I mean, I hate to say this, and everyone says is the lottery rigged and things like that. I really don't think it is. There's too much on the line for it to be rigged. But I will say that it is definitely good for the NHL that the Blackhawks, a big market, big original 6 franchise, is getting the first overall pick. Don't think for a second that the NHL isn't quietly clapping behind the scenes, but I just don't think that it is really rigged. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you guys think the NHL draft lottery is rigged? There's been a lot of talk about that, but there just hasn't been enough real evidence. I mean, we've heard these tinfoil hat theories for a long time. I just have a hard time getting behind them. They're not legit. There's not really anything to them. And I just don't think there's much really to go off of it, right? So, of course, now we're going to recap last night's games. We did a live stream, so make sure to check out that live stream we did last night. Really good conversations. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the team that I'm cheering for, which is the Vegas Golden Knights. They played the Edmonton Oilers last night. They are evened up at 2 games apiece, 2 wins apiece through the first 4 games. It's been such a back and forth series. We haven't really seen any close games in really the second round, but specifically this series. The Edmonton Oilers win it 4-1 in Edmonton before heading back to Vegas. That was kind of a do or die game for the Oilers. If they had to go back to Vegas down 3-1, send your last rites to the dying, because I don't think that would have been very easy for the Oilers to come back from. But that was a huge win for them. Obviously, Stuart Skinner coming back and playing quite well. I think that was really big for them. But now, again, the questions for the Golden Knights. It's kind of a seesaw series. One team gets blown out, then the next team gets blown out the next game. It's just been a very reactionary series. I think Alex Pietrangelo should get suspended for that two-handed slash. He looked like Paul Bunyan. That's a good old cross. That's a big slash right across the arms for no reason. And I hate to say it, it's not good for the game. Draisaitl, who has been so electric this playoffs, it would be really bad if he wasn't a part of that team throughout the rest of the series. I think he's okay. He might have embellished it a little bit just to make the point, but it was a good two-handed slash, and I think it was worthy of at least a one-game suspension. We're at the point in the series where you can't afford to lose a guy for 2 or 3 games. I think it's a one-game suspension. It would kind of follow along the lines of the Cale Makar suspension. If the Cale Makar suspension was 1 game, this should definitely be a one-game suspension. So that's my thoughts on that. Also, the Leafs staved off elimination in Florida. They avoided the sweep as they won 2-1. Probably their best game of the playoffs, arguably their best game of the entire season, including the 82-game regular season. The Leafs needed that one. It was 1-0 throughout most of the game. A goal from Nylander, and then the Panthers tied on the power play. Really created a little bit of, this is real gut check time for the Leafs. And next thing you know, the Leafs come up with a huge goal from Mitch Marner. A tough one for Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky would want that one back. He was in the right place. He was in the right position, just couldn't see it. A great screen in front. And Mitch Marner and William Nylander scoring massive goals for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That was a huge one. And really, really critical win there for the Leafs as they head back to Game 5 on Friday night, which honestly is probably going to be more nerve-wracking with all the Leaf fans there, all the Toronto media. The pressure is going to be on the Leafs the rest of this series. Whether they win or not, they are going to have all the pressure in the world. And they survive 1 more day or 2 more days, right? Tonight's action. We have another team on the brink of elimination as we have the New Jersey Devils heading down to Carolina for game number 5. It's a 3-1 series lead for the Hurricanes. A really deflating game 4 loss for the Devils. They just did not look good. Their goaltending has been an issue. They haven't had a quality start from their goaltending the entirety of the series, and that's really hurt the Devils' chances here. The Hurricanes, I said this earlier on, I said the Hurricanes win this series in 6, and I'm looking 1,000% right now. Really tough situation for the Devils. You could just tell, like, this team has been through the ringer this year with everything that happened in the first week of the season. Fire Lindy, then they're saying, sorry, Lindy, we love you, to the 2-0 series deficit in the first round, to winning the series. And now in the second round, they just look beat. They look tired. They just don't look really ready for this. There is a lot to like, though. We've seen Akira Schmidt look really good at points. Luke Hughes' emergence has been incredible. So it's really good news for the Devils. But I think the Hurricanes, shout out to Rod Brendamore. Honestly, I think Rod Brendamore is the reason that the Hurricanes are looking like their 2020 version of themselves. 2019 version of the Carolina Hurricanes, a team that is good. They've got some good players, but it's just the way they play. It doesn't matter who's on the ice. You could figuratively put a Pee-wee team on that Hurricanes jersey, and I think they would play just as well because of the system. Now, obviously, that's a little bit hyperbolic, but it is something worth mentioning because I think right now, this Hurricanes team, I hate them as an Islanders fan, seeing what they did to the Islanders in the first round. But the reality is the way they play, whether you have an Islanders roster or a Devils team that is so high flying, they can beat you any way you play because the Hurricanes dictate the play. And come playoff time, whoever's able to dictate the play better, and the Hurricanes have proven that, we're seeing that right now. And I think right now, if you want to take a look at a team like the Hurricanes as a sleeper to win the Stanley Cup, I know everybody's talking about the Panthers on the East Coast. Everybody's talking about the Dallas Stars on the West Coast. The Hurricanes right now, you want to talk about a true, legitimate dark horse. Despite winning the Metropolitan Division, I do think it is the Carolina Hurricanes. Thank you for joining us, Notorious TBG. Jack Hughes was falling everywhere. Couldn't skate. I think it was game 3. Tells me he's trying too hard, playing out of control. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's a really good point, Notorious, because I think what happens when you look at a team that's, I hate using the word overcompensating, but when guys try to do more than their role and they don't trust their teammates to do what, if everybody does what they have to do, that pressure isn't there. And everybody's able to play their game and dial it in. The problem is, it's when everybody's trying to make up for everybody else's mistakes and doing everybody else's work that they fail to do their own business, right? And I hate to say it, I think that's kind of what's happened to Jack Hughes. Is he's trying to do too much. He's had an incredible breakout season this year, but I 100% agree with you there, Notorious. So that's the first series tonight, and that will be at 7 p.m. Eastern. Of course, at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, the series heads back to Dallas, the Seattle Kraken and the Dallas Stars, for game number 5. That's going to be a really, really good series. And we're seeing it so far. They're even at 2 apiece. The Seattle Kraken look to get revenge after losing game 4. A crazy game. Honestly, this entire series is not what I was expecting it to be. I was expecting a low goal scoring series. But both of these teams have proven they have the offensive juggernauts to get it done. And listen, Dallas Stars fans, I said Dallas would win this series in 6, but I am going to tell you right now, all those Dallas Stars fans that told me that the Seattle Kraken don't have a good enough offense and they have no offensive depth, you guys need to can it right now. Like, you were so wrong. And welcome to the chat, Morgan. Good morning, guys. I'm on my way to school right now. Thank you for joining us, Morgan. I appreciate it. Any of you that are in here, make sure to like the stream as well, as this is going to be something new that I'm going to try out for a little while. We'll see how things go here. It's going to be a daily podcast at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So stay tuned every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We're going to try and make this a thing. So hopefully you guys like the content. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys think of this new live stream template. Hopefully it works out. But with that said, to recap this one, Seattle and Dallas, it's been a back and forth between Grubauer and Ottinger having bad starts, and I'm looking to see what happens here. Yeah, I know, Morgan. Yeah, I'm upset about that game last night as well. I really thought Vegas really could have put a stranglehold on the Oilers, but the Oilers regained home ice advantage with that win last night. So we'll see what happens. This is the critical game now, because whoever wins game 5 is really going to have the dominance in the series. They have 2 chances to win that game, that 4th game in the series. I think game 5 is going to be pivotal. And I think Vegas has what it takes to win that game. And I think they will win one of those next 2. And I think they'll be okay. But that's going to be a really good series. Yeah, really good point, Notorious. Yeah, you can't. They've been doing that all series long. And you know what? Evander Kane is a pain in the ass. Excuse my French, but he has been really good for the Oilers, just causing a ton of chaos, making things really difficult. You got to give credit where it's due. And I think when you look at the way the Oilers have kind of just pushed around the Golden Knights and kind of frustrated them, that's when they play their best, is when they're agitating, when they're getting the Golden Knights players off their game and drawing those penalties. Yeah, the Oilers are so good on the power play. You can't let them get on the power play. And I get that, because then you have to play a much more sound, very, very disciplined game. And against the Oilers, when they're trying to get penalties out of you, it's extraordinarily difficult to not take repercussions. But I think that's going to be critical. That's going to be on the coaching of Bruce Cassidy. He has to make these guys fully aware. Listen, we need to do what it takes here to just shut up and win the game. Worry about what we need to do, and don't give them stupid penalties. Don't give them power plays that are going to hurt us. All right, guys. So thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, this is going to become a regular thing. 10 a.m. Eastern time. I'm going to be trying to do a daily live stream for you guys. So hopefully this catches on and we get some more people in here. I saw a couple of you guys get in here. Yeah, Morgan, have a great day at school. Thank you for joining us. Notorious, Timothy, Morgan, all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to watch the recap because I talked about a lot in this half hour, but I do want to make this a regular thing. So stay tuned every day at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'll be looking forward to talking to you guys. Make sure to like the stream and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Peace out, guys.